Turning now to the war in Gaza, where a team from the World Health Organization has visited the Aqsa hospital, and described chaotic scenes. WHO staff said that they were delivering supplies to the hospital and witnessed large numbers of wounded people being brought in for urgent treatment after an explosion. WHO staff filmed from inside the hospital, which they said was in dire need of medical supplies. The hospital, described as Gaza's most important, is also dealing with critical staff shortages. The organization is planning to facilitate the deployment of emergency medical teams to help support overworked doctors and nurses. The WHO's coordinator said that evacuation orders and fierce fighting had forced most medical staff to leave. He urged protection of the hospital.
This hospital is currently operating with about 30% of the staff that it had just a few days ago. They are seeing, in some cases, hundreds of casualties every day in a small emergency department. Yesterday they said they had one doctor working overnight in this emergency department, and it's really a chaotic scene. The hospital director just spoke to us, and he said his one request is that this hospital be protected, even though many of his staff have left.
So that's the message from the WHO. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due in Israel for talks on the war in Gaza as fears grow that the conflict could widen across the region. Speaking in Qatar, Blinken said that it was imperative to protect civilians in Gaza. Israel is battling Hamas, which classified as a terrorist organization by the U.S., Germany, and many other countries.
Antony Blinken on a diplomatic drive to prevent the spread of the Israel-Hamas war. After meetings in Qatar, the US Secretary of State warned on Sunday the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza could metastasize and threaten security in the wider Middle East. In Doha, Blinken laid out his goals, and he had praise for his hosts.
In all of my meetings over the last 2 days, we've discussed ongoing efforts to better protect civilians in Gaza and to get more humanitarian assistance to them and to get the remaining hostages out and home with their loved ones. Qatar was instrumental in the negotiations that led to the simultaneous release of more than 100 hostages, including American citizens, and a pause in the fighting that, during that time, enabled us to double the flow of humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza.
For these displaced Palestinians caught in the crossfire of this conflict in Gaza, help can't come soon enough. And the US Secretary of State made his position on their status clear.
Palestinian civilians must be able to return home as soon as conditions allow. They must not be pressed to leave Gaza.
But at the funeral of 2 Palestinian journalists killed in an apparent Israeli airstrike in the south of the Gaza Strip, the prospect of peace seems far away. Blinken said the killings were an unimaginable tragedy and that he was deeply sorry for the family's loss. The US top diplomat's Middle East tour continues on Monday with visits that include Israel and the occupied West Bank.
And the German foreign minister is also on a trip to the Middle East. It's her 4th visit to the region since the October 7th attacks. Today, she visited a Palestinian village in the West Bank. Here's what she had to say after the meeting with people there.
We know by listening to different Palestinians what it means that radical settlers are forcing people away from their home. But it makes it different if you really speak to people who just lived here a few hundred meters away and now had to move with their 7 children because they cannot guarantee the security of their own family anymore, because radical settlers are attacking also their children. This is not only inhuman, this is illegal. Illegal under Israeli law, this is illegal under international law. And I want to make very clear as the German foreign minister from Germany that we are standing for the right of every Palestinian people to live freely and secure in their own house. And this is why we are calling on the Israeli government to not look away when radical settlers are threatening Palestinian people, but to take up their obligation of protecting Palestinians living here on their own territory. And we are here because we want to underline that a two-state solution, meaning that people can live freely and security and in dignity in Gaza and also in the West Jordanland, is of high importance in the West Bank, is of high importance for the future of both Israelis and Palestinians.
The German foreign minister speaking a short while ago. Tanya Kramer is standing by with the view from Jerusalem. So, with the German foreign minister, we just heard her speaking there, visiting Palestinians in the West Bank. Remind us of the biggest issues there at the moment. She specifically touched on settler violence and security.
Yeah, I think this was one of the biggest issues here, what we've been hearing this morning. But of course, the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, was also holding talks with Palestinian officials in Ramallah. But she made a point in visiting a village in the occupied West Bank, a Palestinian village that is close to Israeli settlements there. And we could hear her, talking in length about the impact of settler violence by extremist Israeli settlers on Palestinians living there. She said that it's Israel's duty to protect them, and that also Palestinians have a right to live in peace and security in their area. She also, again, we heard it there, criticized settlement building or the expansion of settlements, which is seen as illegal under international law by most of the international community. Now, this, of course, comes on the backdrop of more incidents that have been recorded since at least the beginning of the war, since October 7th, the terror attacks there in the occupied West Bank by extremist settler violence, by Israeli human rights organizations and also by the United Nations. And that has resulted in injuries, property damage and also displacement, especially among the herding and Bedouin communities in the occupied West Bank.
Tanya, how about the situation in Gaza? Because after meeting with Israeli officials yesterday, the German foreign minister also said that it was, and I'm quoting here, increasingly clear that the Israeli army must do more to protect civilians in Gaza. Then she called for a less intensive operation. How likely is the Israeli government likely to listen to that call from Berlin?
Well, I think you have to see, Germany, she also reiterated, of course, that Germany is standing side by side with Israel and that Israel has the right to defend itself since the October 7th attacks. So that is, of course, what she said as well. But she also, and I think there we see a slight change also in what Germany is saying. That comes along what you also hear from the United States. And we've been hearing that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is also in the region, that more needs to be done to protect Palestinian civilians and to get more aid into Gaza. Now, what impact does that have? That is still to be seen. Germany has increased its humanitarian assistance, but of course, also as the United States, they have not called for a full ceasefire as of yet.
Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem, thank you.